Yeah, yes, other than Carlos Alomar, who plays Nile Rodgers, because Nile has his own band and has an album, and he's doing his own tour. So
Who's that young unknown guitarist?
Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Where did you get him?
I saw him originally in the Montreux Jazz Festival when he was supporting. I can't remember who it was he was supporting. That's how important the night was. I mean, it was somebody great, like Buddy Guy or something, but he came on as a support act with his band.
He's mainly a blues.
Absolutely blues. That's all he is. I mean, he sounds almost identical to Albert King. I mean, he's truly one of the best. He's going to be an astonishing surprise.
Mm-hmm.
I think he'll be a huge guitarist. He's the best blues guitarist I've seen in 10 years. Quite he is convincing as Clapton was when he first started playing.
And he's very young.
Very young, yeah. His brother is with another rock and roll band in the States called the Fabulous Thunderbirds.
Oh,
that's his brother, Vaughan.
I saw him in New York.
Yeah.
The bottom line, it was a great performance.
But this
one
is
of the best guitar players I heard in the last
But
year.
this is the kid brother who's even better. This kid is blinding, absolutely amazing. He's truly astonishing. Niall himself was, because Niall is an excellent guitarist, was very wary of using another guitarist on the album. I said, I wanted to bring this kid in from Texas. I said, you're not going to, he's absolutely fantastic. He said, well, a little white kid from Texas playing the blues? And I said, yes, but believe me. And we got him in the studio and just, he blew Niall away. I mean, he's wonderful.
Did it fit in your plans to go back to blues and rhythm and blues?
And he's willing to take on the other material, because on stage we'll be performing stuff from Heroes and Lodger and Low and whatever. And he's quite willing to perform within those confines as well. So I'm very excited about using it.
Not an Adrian Bellucci type.
Not at all. No. I think Albert King is the nearest I can think of in tone. Angry blues, but not many notes. He'll play where another guitarist will play 15 notes. He'll play 2 notes, but they're the right notes.
Yeah,
they're just
his brother
wonderful.
Is playing also very sparse.
Yes, yes.
Well, we made a little list of things we want to ask.
Did you?
And the first thing we both noticed yesterday in the press conference was that you really often use the word positive.
Mm.
We listened back to the tape last night, and we found out that positive showed up. We even saw maybe you joined Scientology, Ronnie, you have or something like that.
No, I don't have to. I'm too positive.
And yeah, we are curious how that happened, how that change in your life occurred, and how.
I think because I had a period when I stopped playing music over the last 2 years and just concentrated on the films and stage things other than rock, like Bertolt Brecht in Bâle and the Elephant Man, whatever. And so I had to really make a decision for myself whether I wanted to return back into music again, and if I was going to, why? And I realized that I couldn't do it unless I really believed in the kind of music that I wanted to, that I could do something useful with it, the music. I'm at an age now where it doesn't occur to me to want to create a furor or some kind of superficial excitement about rock, that I think there could well be a return in music to some kind of social observation or statement can be made in music again, in a very simplistic and basic fashion. And that's what I've started doing with the new album. I hope that the next album will be even more convincing in that area. But it's hard to start writing in this style, for me especially, because I've been such a formalist and playing with construction. But so for me it's hard work, writing simple songs, very hard.
So was there a certain point where you had to persuade yourself to get into music back again? Was there a point as you had doubts?
Yes, I had doubts. I just didn't want to just see myself as an experimenter all the time. I think the situation in the world is in such a troublesome and weary plight that it occurred to me that as an artist I wanted to do something constructive with music now.
Do you think there's a need to put something healthy in this?
Very much so. I think
against
so.
all this, these weird things?
I think so. I think it's very easy to now, because of the zeitgeist, to slip into a steady nihilism, and I found it very easy to adopt a nihilist stance, and I had to shake that. It seems to be cliché to do simple, honest songs, and I thought, well, that's probably what's wrong then. They must be done.
Have there been any special experiences you had who put you in this new mood, in this change?
Yes, I think answering questions from my son. I think that the older he gets, the more observant and intelligent he gets. He asks me tough questions, and one really has to think about the answers. And I think that changes your perspective an awful lot. From being a mid-20s teenager, rock and roll type person, he's now 11, coming on 12. So he's really at the peak of his inquisitiveness. And that's very helpful to me.
It's not a new image you created like
no.
in former times, every 2 years.
No, I
so
think
there was a new Bowie.
No, I think it probably started on the '78 tour, and on that particular tour I felt that I just wanted to start interpreting the songs in a more realistic fashion on stage, and not enhance them with a character of any kind. So it's been a slow process. It's been nothing radical or quick. It's just, as I've got older with my son, I think it's the togetherness of a small family unit encourages one to think of the future more, and to try and be positive about the future, because it's too easy to be negative, and I don't think that's something we need at the moment.
Yeah, you mentioned yesterday that in today's music it's so much style over content.
Yeah.
But then again, I mean, you introduced very much the stylish aspect, and a lot of young groups that followed you on that way now only do style and they forget about the content. So that's a funny process somehow that you
It's an irony. It's an irony. Yeah. I pride myself that the content of the material that I was writing at that particular time had as much importance as the way it was presented, or the tonality of it. I tend to feel that a lot of the new bands have they are vacuous. There's nothing to grasp hold of under the style. I would hope that things like Low and even Diamond Dogs, it has a substantial body of work itself. There was something definitely to grip hold of, but it was presented in a very stylistic fashion. Yeah.
But you are doing the unusual again now.
In terms of its ordinariness,
go back
yeah.
to something like the mainstream or so.
Yes, I guess it will seem like that. The emphasis is very much off synthesizers in my new work. It's much more on the optimistic feel of early rhythm and blues, the possibility of making mistakes on records. And that's another reason we did it so quickly. The album was recorded very much in 1 or 2 takes.
Did you follow what Lou Reed did in the last years?
Yes.
There's something similar.
Yes, I think there is. I think a lot of us who went through the so-called decadent period, I think came out of it.
Pete Townsend.
Absolutely, yeah. I guess this is what happens when rock and roll matures. It hasn't happened often. I mean, most of us are dead, but it's the ones who are living on, I think, come out of the you have to make the decision, I think, to leave the excitement and panic and desperation of being a teenager behind, I think, at one point, and realize that it's not bad being 36 years old, that there is still something to say for being 36 and for other 36-year-old people, you know.
Let's break.
It's and you have to learn how to be comfortable in that situation, and if you're not, then you're going to be forever grabbing for straws in the wind and trying to seem as though you're an angry young man. You can still be angry, but it's a moderated anger, I think.
What the lyrics are concerned, what we what would be your aim to get more content into your songs? In what direction? What would you like to write about? And what are positive statements to do for you in songs?
I think from now that also when one gets older, you talk in a more general fashion. I think when you're younger, you pick like say something like "Panic in Detroit" is a very small vignette about the snipers and in that particular area. I think now that the subject matter becomes more humanist, and I talk in terms of two people and an emotional relationship, which can, I feel, say a lot more in a broader way.
Yeah, politics starts with two persons.
Yes, absolutely, exactly that. But I think that probably my favourite song on the album is an old one that I wrote with Iggy Pop called China Girl, which is about inherently the colonialist, imperialist feeling in the Englishman towards people from other races, and it's fairly angry, but it's loving in an emotional way. But it tries to say yes, if we're not careful, it's very easy if things get bad to slip into a nationalistic. It's so easy to slip into a nationalistic pose, and it's. Then she says, "Shut your mouth," and she sort of throws it all away. And I'm very pleased the way that has turned out on the album.
That's a beautiful song.
And I'm very excited about the video of it. I found a wonderful Chinese girl in Australia who is going through a lot of those problems herself.
Will you direct this video?
Yeah, with David Mallet.
Yeah.
But
Was for all tracks you did?
I've just done 3 so far, but one called Modern Love, one called China Girl, and Let's Dance. And she has a twofold problem. She's in Australia, where the Chinese are pretty much looked down upon and as the Orientals, but also she doesn't speak any Chinese, and so the Chinese there won't accept her either. So it was easy to talk the song over with her. She was fully understanding about what the song was saying, and that's a very good video.
Yesterday, one quote, Captain Man, you said you were switching between exercise and emotional content.
Yes, yeah.
Is that also, you could imagine you do that in the future, or is that for the moment a final step, that you came back from exercising different styles?
Yeah, I have a habit of vacillating between the two. It's always, I guess because I was always interested in how art was made and how it's built up, that sometimes my passion becomes dispassionate, and I start looking from the outside and say, well, that's really interesting. And what happens if you do this? But not for the interest in the subject.
Yeah.
And there's always a great confusion about how far you go each way. But at the moment, I've pulled right back from exercise. That's why I stopped working with my old musicians for the album, because they're so used to my way of working now, that they would automatically slip into a particular train of thought that I didn't want at the moment. I wanted musicians who were strictly into their own kind of music, and not into my kind of music.
When you look back now on the different stages and phases you went through, with disguises and masks,
Yeah.
and images, how do you relate to that now? Was it a growing up process? Are there special phases you can relate to or not relate to that are very strange for you now?
I think I think they're all indicative of an artist achieving or trying to achieve maturity or understanding within himself, not necessarily maturity, but trying to rid himself of confusion. So for that, I think they're valid. But they're something that I don't want to return to. I think they are very parallel with the age and the experience I was going through at the time. I mean, I never want to be 29 again. Never. I'm happy to have left that. But it's an interesting piece of work that was left behind from that period. I don't play my old records very much.
Which one do you play when you play?
What now? What records do I play now?
Yeah.
Lord. I'm very keen on a band called Bobby Gregg and Friends, from 57, I think.
No, I thought your own records.
Oh, my own records.
If you play anything.
I think one that I still like a lot is Lodger. That's one of my favourite albums. I like it because it's the start of it's actually making some kind of humanist statement on that particular album. It wasn't quite so icy as the ones previous to it. I think side 2 of Low is still a side I like very much, but I don't play them with any great consistency.
If you're listening to music by other people, are you listening to minimal music too? To music of Steve Reich or Phil Glass?
No, I think that of the only new music I've listened to recently that I really enjoy was Satyagraha by Philip Glass.
Yeah.
I thought it was an extraordinary, wonderful piece of music. Again, Philip is, I don't know, I haven't talked with Philip for a long time, but from that piece of music he seems to be moving into a more humanist, emotional area, and I'm wondering if that is something that many of us are feeling. It seemed the 70s was a whole plethora of exercise and redefinition and re-evaluation of what we've been doing before, and if that's so, maybe the 80s is now we should take advantage of everything we've learnt and see if we can pull it together to make some realistic statement about how we want the world to be. Now we've been playing around during the 70s, well, what the world looks like, which is what I think I was doing. This is what the world looks like to me. At the end of the 70s, you say, well, this is what I wrote. My God, the world looks awful through my eyes. You know, so what's the other side of that coin? What do I want the world to look like? What is it I want? What do I want for my son?
Yeah.
You know, and it's something from there. So from all that exercise and learning, one hopes that but not with that glamorous mystique of the Dylan period or whatever. It should now be more workmanlike towards making, well, more like, I don't know, the arts and crafts movement that happened in the turn of the century. God, that sounds weird. It's very hard for me to explain. I hope the music says it.
But is an opinion shared by other musicians that you know, or actors, directors, whoever? Are you feeling on your own saying this, or are you feeling companions and people who feel the same?
I think, well, I know certainly from somebody like Nile Rodgers it's what he wants to do, but he, of course, has initially a stronger reason for doing it because he has a great cultural experience to push through. I mean, for him, he has a very strong black statement to make. But for me, it's a question of relating to my own culture and seeing where the terror is and where the fear is in the future. And it seems very complicated to me. But with Philip, I feel it through his music, Philip Glass. But I haven't talked with many other musicians, no. I haven't talked with them for a long time.
Interview with them for February.
With Philip? Yeah.
And I asked him about Civil Wars. He didn't know yet very much about it because he's so busy.
Yes.
And he didn't start yet. Do you know anything about this?
Robert Wilson is the great catalyst. I mean, he can charm anybody. He's a great charmer. And he's charmed us all into saying, yes, we'd like to do something. But how far on he's going, I don't know. He's trying to raise the most extraordinary amount of money for it. Because what he's going to do is going to cost millions, absolute millions. There's no way it's ever going to make any money back. So I think backers are thinking twice about putting money to it. Well, we're going to do this 12-hour piece, and it's going to take place all over the world, and will you put some money into it? And they're saying, we'll never make any money back, no.
You'll be only in the part Philip Glass composing the music for.
Originally, Robert wanted myself to write some music for it, but that's going to be impossible because with the tour, and then I'm also working on ideas for my next album, and he wants to start the performances off this year, and there's no way I can do it. So I suggested that he ask Philip to contribute, and David Byrne to do the lyrics or the poetry, or Iggy Pop. It would be interesting to see Iggy Pop writing with Philip Glass. I thought it would be an extraordinary combination. Because I believe that Iggy probably is one of the most underrated poets in America. Not necessarily as a musician or as a rock artist, but I think his lyric form, I think he's a very substantial poet.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see his interpretation of Abraham Lincoln.
Is that coming in phases, your your interest for music or films or acting on a stage? Is that you through with one and you start another? Is that a deliberate decision? Now I want to do for a couple of months, get into films, or is that maybe also that you sign a contract to do a film and you would prefer to do some music at that time, but now you sign the contract, and are you forced already, or are you free to choose what you want?
No, I'm very free to do what I want. What happened with the filming thing is that the hunger was almost over, and I was quite ready to go back into music at that time. But then Oshima came through in the last week of filming in the hunger and said, we start in 3 weeks' time if you still want to do it. Because he approached me 2 years ago. But he was having problems with the censors in Japan at the time and couldn't raise any money. Because the Japanese went very much against him because of Realm of the Senses and what he had to say about the Japanese way of life. I think probably there will be some controversy also about the new film in Japan, because his approach comes from a mellow left-wing artist. I mean, once upon a time, Oshima was very radical and had close ties with Red Brigade and the riots in Japan. But has, I think that is tempered somewhat. Again, left and right is very hard. He told me that something very interesting, that he and Mishima once did an interview on television when they were both at their most extremes, when Oshima was extreme left and Mishima extreme right. And he said the awful thing is that we agreed about everything. And he said, and it just showed me something is wrong when you get into those areas of dispassionate, both of them non-humanistic points of view. So there's somewhere in the middle. So now what he is saying, it has, I think when you become to the areas of extreme left or right, the love element, the actual love for humanity, it is gone. It seems to be cauterized and put on hold. You think, well, we'll turn back to loving man after we've got society sorted out, which is just impossible. There has to be always an element of heart. Yes, yeah, and it may work quickly. I'm sure it works quickly, but some things, it doesn't mean that speed is right, you know. I mean, you can't leave the human element out of it. So Oshima has come back much more with a compassionate feel for the Japanese, but it's still a very angry version of what was happening to the Japanese mentality during World War II. I think they will find it very hard to take. His statement is that almost by tacit agreement their nation went mad. And even afterwards it was hard for them to understand what was wrong with their madness. And this is stated in very many levels with the film. I'm just a little worried that some of the levels will be not understood by Western audiences, but that's part and parcel of making a foreign film. So I guess that's, like Mephisto, I found an intriguing film, an extraordinary film, but I felt that some of it could only be understood by a German audience. Although it did so well in the English-speaking world, I thought that was tremendous.
Did you know Oshima longer before? Or?
I knew his works like The Boy and Ceremony, Death by Hanging, and stuff like that.
You liked it?
Oh, very much. Absolutely tremendous filmmaker, because he goes against all the rules of Japanese cinema. There's no idealizing the cultural values or the myth of the samurai and all that. I mean, it doesn't. He shows the meat and bones of the other side of Japan, which is this reluctance to be individual because of the need to be the same, because they're all around the coast and they're just packed very tightly, and even doors go like that so they don't take up space opening that way, and
but he directs in a very ritual
yes,
Japanese
it's almost
way,
it's almost a parody of the Japanese form. I just find him a very intriguing man for a Japanese. I mean, there are very few Japanese who are quite as, I guess, westernized, really, in his need to be individualistic in his approach.
How is this experience, the experience with Tony Scott in comparison?
Let's have a coffee, yeah.
In comparison to Oshima's work, it must be a little bit like the contrary.
Working with Tony was for me a disappointment. I think he's potentially an excellent filmmaker, but I think he had a lot of problems because it was his first movie, and I think, thank you, I think he was terribly intimidated by MGM, who took advantage of the fact that it was his first movie and really lent on him very heavily all the way through, and it made him very twitchy. And I don't think that he was able to make the film with the kind of conviction that he would have if he'd had a sympathetic producer or set of producers. So what you have, I think, is a very well-made movie, but lacking a little heart, and to my mind excessive on the blood content. I find some of it repulsive. But amusing and interesting in terms of makeup and effect. Again, I would imagine because of the nature of the American audience, it might do very well, but one's not necessarily comfortable with that.
You agree a lot more with the work you did with Oshima?
That for me is just about the most fulfilling working situation I've ever been in. It was almost like being with a workshop. You know, it was.
Are you planning to direct yourself?
Yes. Martin Scorsese. This is something I've not talked about with anybody yet, as a matter of fact. But Martin Scorsese is trying to bring together a workshop format with. People he feels could be good directors if they were given the chance. Because I believe he had very similar problems to Tony Scott in terms of working with big budgets and monolithic film companies, especially with the new one, King of Comedy.
He had to change the end.
Absolutely. He said that, in his words, $12 million was spent about a film of two people talking in a room. He said it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, and he's favouring more and more films made for TV. I think they can be done at very reasonable budgets and fast and with the same spontaneity as films used to be made. And he's encouraging some of us to put forward our ideas for 30-minute pieces for TV, and he's trying to get a production company together to back us on their projects. And he has a series of ideas for poets. He wants us to think about poets that we've admired. The two things that occur to me would be Lou Reed as Delmore Schwartz, which might be interesting. But the one that really I think that might work very well is I would maybe like to work with Susan Sarandon as Diane Arbus. I think that one might be a nice piece to work on.
Diane Arbus?
Diane Arbus, she was a New York photographer.
Diane Arbus.
Yeah, whose work is reflected in so many different forms. So many photographers have been exactly, or even The Shining. The photography of the two girls in The Shining is so much an Arbus look. Arbus is seen in so many places as a desperate and interesting woman who took her own life. And to understand why she took that, I think, might be an interesting exercise. So I would like to do something like that. And if Martin can get the money together by the beginning of next year, I'll...
It would not be so easy for him to get money.
Finding it very hard. It's very hard. I mean, unless you have something which is automatically a great commercial success, then nobody's interested in doing something like that. But the best thing I think, in working in terms of making a half-hour or 45-minute piece of television, that one is not opposed to putting one's own money into something like that, because it's not going to ruin you for life. You don't think, well, if I put this money in and mortgage my house and mortgage this and that, you know, if nothing happens, I've lost everything. And that's... But with the short TV piece, I think it's worth taking the gamble, you know.
And you want to direct this film about Diana?
Yes, absolutely. I've talked with Sarandon about it, and she's very excited about doing it. And of course, I've always wanted to work with Iggy as an actor. It would be great to work with him on something like Catcher in the Rye or something. But those pieces are impossible to get because Salinger won't sell, and he won't have anything filmed. So that's maybe one can write around it and write a Catcher in the Rye type piece, but that's and give him credit, but it's not quite the same. But Iggy, I think, is just a first-class anti-hero. I mean, he really is an American anti-hero. And in his private life, he's even more vulnerable and amusing than he is as a stage performer. I mean, his real self is maybe it's just worth filming the Iggy Pop story, because that is so gloriously ridiculous. It's the antithesis of the usual rock and roll idol. And it's such a mess that it's worth putting on record. But I haven't approached him about doing that.
So is he living in Los Angeles?
Oh, he's...
On New Orleans, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's permanently on the road, all the time. He can't... Nobody buys his fucking albums, you know? Nobody ever buys Iggy's albums. So his life is just a stream of one-night stands, and